I remember sitting on my couch, staring at my phone, telling myself, "It's quiet now. That means peace." "Or it means you're alone again," my friend Mark said on speaker. "I'm fine," I told him. "I've moved on." "You always say that right before someone hurts you," he replied. I didn't answer. Silence was easier than defending myself again. I was always the safe option. The guy women leaned on when their real plans failed. The one they called when they needed comfort, money, or someone to listen without judgment. I told myself it was love. Deep down, I knew it was convenience. "You're such a good man," my first girlfriend once said, lying beside me on a broken couch. "Then why don't you choose me?" I asked, half joking. She laughed. "You don't get it. You're not like that." "Not like what? Dangerous? Ambitious? Replaceable?" I never pushed. I never demanded. I feared that asking for more would make them leave. Later, when I had a better job, another woman smiled at my apartment and said, "I feel safe with you." I smiled back, proud of that word. Safe. But safe slowly became invisible. "You deserve better," Mark warned me more than once. "She's just stressed," I replied every time. "Love takes patience." "Love also takes spine," he snapped. I didn't want to hear it. I'd paid for dinners, listened to complaints, fixed problems that weren't mine. When they pulled away, I pulled closer. When they hesitated, I waited. I called it loyalty. It was fear. My third relationship felt different at first. She looked into my eyes and said, "You're rare." I believed her because I needed to. "You don't have to try so hard," she told me later. I didn't know how to stop. Each woman entered my life at a different time, but they all found the same version of me. Agreeable, forgiving, always available. After another quiet breakup that ended with "You're amazing," but I told myself, "This is it." I breathed easier. Mark texted, "You okay?" I replied, "Yeah, finally at peace." I believed it. I really did. I had no idea my past was already on its way back. I loved her when I had nothing. No money, no direction, just hope and excuses. She used to hold my face and say, "We'll grow together." She said the night we ate instant noodles on the floor. "I promise I'll do better," I told her. "I know," she smiled. "I just wish she wanted more." She smiled at messages she wouldn't explain. "Who's that?" I asked once. "A friend from work." She said too quickly. I nodded. I always nodded. One evening, she sighed and said, "I need space." "You're just comfortable." The word stung. Comfortable sounded like a waiting room. When I finally confronted her, my voice shook. "Are you talking to someone else?" She didn't deny it. She leaned back and crossed her arms. "Emotionally?" "Maybe, but that's because you don't challenge me." I felt my chest collapse. "So it's my fault?" "I didn't say that," she replied calmly. Instead, I swallowed everything. "I can change," I said. "I don't want to wait," she answered. We sat in silence. My anger begged to be heard, but fear gagged it. I told myself forgiveness was strength. I told myself love meant enduring pain quietly. The day she left, she packed without tears. "You'll be okay," she said at the door. "You always are." I watched her walk away, feeling smaller with every step. I didn't chase her. I didn't argue. I stood there, learning my first real lesson. Silence doesn't heal. It hardens. That betrayal taught me how to lock my anger inside and call it maturity. I learned to smile while bleeding. I learned that if I stayed quiet long enough, maybe the hurt would disappear. Before closing the door, she turned and said, "You'll always be too safe." The door clicked shut. I sat on the floor and whispered, "Then why does this hurt so much?" I met her when my bank balance finally stopped scaring me and my phone started ringing with opportunity instead of apologies. "We're a team now," I told her. "Of course," she said, already planning ahead. I paid for dinners, helped rewrite her resume, rehearsed interviews with her at midnight. "I couldn't do this without you," she said, squeezing my hand. I believed love was investment. When she got promoted, she kissed my cheek and said, "See, we're winning." But winning slowly became hers alone. She stopped asking about my day. "You worry too much," she said when I noticed the distance. "I'm busy." Busy sounded temporary. It wasn't. I covered bills so she could save. "It's just for now," she promised. I nodded again. When her lifestyle grew faster than my patience, she laughed. "Don't be weird about money," she said. "I supported you before," I reminded her. She frowned. "That's different." One night I asked, "Do you still see us the same way?" She sighed loudly. Why are you so insecure? The word cut. I just want effort, I said. You're trying to control me, she snapped. I sat there stunned, realizing concern had become a crime. She started coming home late, not hiding it, not explaining it. You don't need to know everything, she said. I heard success had made her lighter, freer, and I had become weight. When I asked where I fit, she said, You should be proud of me. I was. I just wasn't needed. The night she left, she didn't pack in anger. I've outgrown this, she said calmly. You mean, I replied. She didn't deny it. I felt smaller, poorer, and ashamed for thinking growth meant together. I told myself this was normal. People leave, winners move on. And that one day someone would stay when I stopped being useful. That belief followed me home, sat beside me on the bed, and whispered excuses until sleep came. The next morning she texted, We should talk later, and I replied, Whenever you want. Hours passed. I watched the screen like it owed me something. When she finally called, her voice was light. Predictable, she corrected. I laughed weakly. That's what trust looks like. You wouldn't understand, she said. I understood enough. I asked, Did I matter? She paused. You helped me grow. The sentence ended everything. I realized love had become a ladder, and I was the rung she stepped off. I didn't beg. I didn't fight. I just said, Take care. She replied, You too. The line went dead. I sat there, hands open, wondering why being dependable always made me disposable. I told myself I should have demanded more, but I didn't know how. I stared at my reflection and asked, Is this all I am good for? No one answered. I picked myself up, went to work, paid the quiet price of being useful. That was how she took what I built and walked away richer. While I stayed behind, still hoping love wasn't just a transaction I failed to price correctly. I promised myself I would learn, but learning felt like betrayal of who I was. So I stayed the same, telling myself endurance was strength. Even as something inside me quietly warned me this pattern would repeat unless I changed, and I wasn't ready to do that yet. Because hope still sounded kinder than truth, and I wasn't done believing in it then. Not yet, not after everything I had already given, lost, and forgiven, without ever being chosen. I met her when I was tired of explaining myself, and she felt like relief. You think too deeply, she said, smiling. Just like me. I laughed because it felt true. She spoke about values, loyalty, growth, and healing, and every word sounded familiar. I finally feel understood, I told her one night. She rested her head on my chest and whispered, This is home. I believed her without hesitation. I invested everything, not just money but trust, time, future plans. We're building something real, I said. I know, she replied, calm and steady. I paid for trips, supported her ideas, introduced her proudly. You're different. She said whenever I doubted myself, You're enough. I held on to those words like proof. When I noticed her phone lighting up late, she smiled and said, Work stuff. I didn't question it. When she canceled plans, she said, You know how driven I am. I admired it. One evening I asked, Are we okay? She looked surprised. Why wouldn't we be? I apologized for asking. Weeks later, a mutual acquaintance laughed and said, I didn't know you were cool with sharing. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? I asked. He hesitated, then said, Never mind. That night I asked her directly, my voice steady. Is there someone else? She didn't panic. She didn't lie. She sighed and sat down. I didn't plan for you to find out like this. The room felt smaller. Find out what? I asked. I've been seeing someone, she said calmly. He's established. I felt cold. While you were telling me this was home? I asked. She nodded slowly. I didn't think it mattered. I laughed, sharp and broken. Did I ever matter? She looked at me with pity. You did once. The words cut deeper than shouting ever could. So what was I asked. A phase? She crossed her arms. You helped me grow. The sentence destroyed me. You used me, I said. No, she replied softly. I outgrew you. I stood there shaking. You mirrored everything I believed, I said. Because I believed it too, she answered. I just wanted more. I wanted to scream. Instead I whispered, You could have told me. She shrugged. You wouldn't have understood. That was when something cracked. Not loudly, quietly, permanently. She packed a small bag while I watched. You'll be okay, she said gently. You always are. The door closed without drama. I sat on the floor, back against the couch, staring at the wall. The apartment felt hollow, like it knew I was finished pretending. I replayed every promise, every calm lie, every moment I trusted without question. I heard my own voice in my head saying, "This time it's real." I laughed, then stopped. The sound scared me. I realized I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't angry either. I felt empty in a way I had never known. Something inside me had snapped, not into pieces, but into clarity. I looked around at the life I had funded, protected, and given away. "Never again," I said out loud. My voice didn't shake. I stood up slowly, feeling unfamiliar weight in my chest. I wasn't broken because she left. I was broken because I finally saw myself clearly. I had given everything to feel chosen, and it still wasn't enough. I walked to the window and stared into the night. Knowing the man who needed to be loved at any cost had just disappeared. What replaced him didn't feel kind, it felt awake. I didn't announce anything, I just stopped showing up, stopped answering calls, stopped explaining myself. And people noticed only when silence replaced the version of me they were used to. Mark called first. "Where are you?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said. "You don't sound fine," he replied. "I'm breathing," I answered and ended the call. Friends assumed I broke. They whispered, "He couldn't handle it." My exes assumed I would crawl back. One texted, "You okay?" Another wrote, "We should talk." And I deleted both without replying. I wasn't angry in the way people expect. I was focused. I woke up, went to work, came home, ate in silence. My mind argued with itself constantly. "You let them do this. You trusted too much. You're weak." Then another voice answered, "You survived." I stopped going to familiar places because I didn't want familiar pity. I stopped telling my story because I was tired of hearing my own excuses. One night, while cleaning my apartment, I found an old voice note saved on my phone. It was hers. "I love how safe you make me feel," she said, laughing softly. I played it twice, then a third time. "Safe," I repeated out loud. My hands shook. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall, but instead I sat down and listened again. Something shifted. "I don't want to be safe anymore," I said to the empty room. The words felt heavy and honest. I deleted the voice note, then every photo, every message, every reminder. My chest burned, but I didn't stop. Rage came in waves. Shame followed close behind. I talked to myself more than anyone else. "You did this," I said. "You allowed it." Another part of me answered, "You believed. That's not a crime." I started sleeping less, moving more. I walked at night to quiet the noise. I lifted weights until my arms hurt because pain with purpose felt cleaner. I didn't post quotes. I didn't tell anyone I was changing. I just showed up for myself. Quietly, imperfectly. When Mark finally showed up at my door, he said, "Man, you disappeared." I looked at him and replied, "I needed to." "From them?" he asked. "From who I was," I answered. He studied my face. "You're different," I shrugged. "I'm awake." He waited for more. I didn't give it. After he left, I sat alone and felt something unfamiliar. Resolve, not motivation. Not anger, resolve. I replayed every moment. I stayed silent when I should have spoken. Every time I paid to be needed. Every apology I offered when I wasn't wrong. Never again, I told myself, not as a threat, but as a rule. I stopped asking why they left and started asking why I stayed. I didn't seek revenge because revenge still ties you to the past. I wanted distance. I wanted control. Days turned into weeks. The noise faded. My thoughts sharpened. I wasn't healed, but I was no longer bleeding everywhere. One morning, I looked in the mirror and said, "You don't need to explain yourself to anyone anymore." The man staring back didn't smile. He nodded. I picked up my keys and left the apartment, knowing this version of me wouldn't announce his return, wouldn't beg to be seen, and wouldn't ever disappear again for the wrong reasons. Time passed without ceremony, the kind that doesn't ask permission, and I rebuilt quietly, without speeches or updates. I met Daniel at work, older, calm, watching more than he spoke. One evening he said, "You react too fast." I replied, "I used to explain myself too much." He nodded. "That's worse." I didn't ask what he meant. Over time, he noticed everything. "You don't need to win every conversation," he said. "You need to control yourself." I asked, "Isn't that the same thing?" He smiled. "Power isn't loud." I started listening. I met Sam through routine, coffee, gym, Silence. You don't talk much, he said once. I'm done performing, I replied. He laughed. Fair. He never asked for my past, and I respected him for it. Then there was Lena. She challenged me without needing me. You don't owe anyone access to your emotions, she said after I declined to explain myself to someone. That sounds cold, I replied. No, she said. It sounds healthy. I noticed she never tested me, never leaned too hard, never confused attention with control. Why don't you chase? I asked her once. She shrugged. I don't need to. That answer stayed with me. Daniel watched my growth closely. You're learning restraint, he said. I'm learning peace, I replied. Same thing, he corrected. I stopped overgiving. When someone asked for favors, I said, I'll think about it. When someone pushed, I said nothing. Silence did the work for me now. Sam noticed. You don't flinch anymore, he said during a late workout. I don't need to, I replied. Feels different, he said. It is. Lena tested my calm without knowing it. One night she asked, What are you afraid of? I answered honestly. Losing myself again. She didn't try to fix it. She said, Then don't. That was it. No advice. No drama. I realized strength wasn't domination. It was discipline. Daniel confirmed it weeks later. Money amplifies who you are, he said. If you're unstable, it makes you louder. If you're grounded, it makes you dangerous. I asked, Dangerous to who? He smiled. To people who used to control you. I stopped explaining my boundaries. I just enforced them. When someone said, You've changed, I replied, Yes, nothing else. I noticed my emotions no longer decided my actions. Anger passed without steering me. Fear knocked without entering. I didn't rush replies. I didn't seek approval. I chose when to engage and when to walk away. Lena said one evening, You don't react. You choose. I answered, I learned the cost of reacting. She nodded. Good. Daniel said later, You're not building a life anymore. You're defending it. That felt accurate. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I wasn't chasing closure. I wasn't rewriting the past. I was shaping myself quietly. Power wasn't control over others. It was control over access, over time, over emotion. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need validation. I needed consistency. When people reached out from my past, I didn't respond immediately. I asked myself, does this cost me peace? If the answer was yes, I didn't engage. Sam noticed my calm and said, You look steady, I replied. I finally am. That was the shift. I wasn't richer yet. I wasn't celebrated. But I was deliberate. And that was real power. I didn't announce my engagement with fireworks or long captions. I told Daniel first. You sure? He asked. Yes, I said. He nodded once. Then don't explain it to anyone, I told Sam next. He grinned. About time. You're not surprised? I asked. You stopped chasing, he said. Something good was bound to walk in. When Lena said yes, it wasn't dramatic. She looked at me and said, I choose this. I replied, so do I. That was enough. Planning the wedding felt unreal. Not because of fear, but because my past stayed quiet. I noticed people who once ignored me suddenly cared. Messages popped up. Man, you've changed. Proud of you. You're glowing lately. I read them without responding. Daniel noticed. Funny how success refreshes memory, he said. I don't need it acknowledged, I replied. That's why it works. He answered. I sent out invitations carefully. Family. Close friends. People who knew me now, not the version they used. One avoided certain names without hesitation. Not out of spite, out of clarity. You didn't invite them, Sam said when he saw the list. No, I replied. Good, he said. Let the past stay unemployed. I thought that was the end of it. Then the messages changed tone. Is it true you're getting married? Heard you're doing really well now. You look different. A mutual friend called. Your ex asked about you. Which one? I asked calmly. All of them, he said, laughing awkwardly. I ended the call. Rumors traveled faster than invitations. I heard bits through others. She didn't think he'd actually move on. They thought he'd be alone forever. They didn't expect this. I didn't comment. I didn't react. That was the point. One evening, Lena asked, Are you okay? I'm good, I replied. You're quiet, she said. I'm protecting us, I answered. She smiled. I trust you. That night, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't saved. Congrats, the message read. I stared at it. When did this happen? Another followed. I deleted both. Daniel said later, curiosity is louder when regret wakes up. I don't owe anyone closure, I replied. Exactly, he said. The wedding date spread faster than I expected. Venues, dates, details leaked through shared circles. I didn't worry about it. Why would I? The guest list was locked. What I didn't know was how closely they were watching. How silence made them restless. How exclusion felt louder than confrontation. Sam joked, imagine their faces. I said. That's cold, he laughed. No, I replied, that's done. A week before the wedding, a friend mentioned casually they might show up. I shrugged. They're not invited. Still, he said. You know how people are. I smiled, unbothered. That's not my problem. Or so I thought. The invitations went out without their names, but the past doesn't always need permission. It just needs an opening. And somewhere between rumors and regret, 3 people decided silence wasn't enough. They planned to be seen. I didn't know that yet. I believed peace meant control. I was about to learn how loud the past gets when it's finally locked out. The morning felt calm in a way that didn't ask questions, and as I adjusted my jacket, Sam said, "You good?" And I replied, "I've never been steadier," and I meant it because my chest was quiet. My hands didn't shake, and the room felt earned. Daniel straightened my collar and said, "Remember, today isn't about proving anything," and I answered, "It's about choosing." And he smiled like he approved. When the music started, I walked forward and saw Lena waiting, her eyes steady, trusting, and I thought, this is real. Guests whispered, chairs shifted, phones lowered, and for a moment the world narrowed to her smile. Then the doors opened again. At first I thought it was late arrivals, but the air changed, sharp and cold, and I heard someone gasp. I turned slowly and saw them walk in together. All 3, side by side. Time didn't stop, it stretched. My first thought wasn't anger, it was disbelief. You coordinated this, I realized. Murmurs spread like ripples. Is that? Someone whispered. No way, another replied. Sam muttered, you've got to be kidding me. Daniel didn't move. He just watched me. I felt eyes on my back, waiting for me to react. Waiting for the old version of me to surface. I didn't give them that. I stood still and met their faces one by one. The first wouldn't look at me. The second held her chin high, but her hands trembled. The third met my eyes, then looked away. Guilt wore different masks, but I recognized them all. Lena leaned closer and whispered, Do you want me to say something? I shook my head slightly and said, No. She searched my face. Are you okay? She asked quietly. I am, I replied, because I was. The years of pain didn't rush back. They stayed where they belonged, behind me. The officiant hesitated, confused, and I nodded once. Continue, I told him without words. The ceremony moved forward in fragments. Vows echoed, but the room buzzed. I heard someone say, this is awkward, and another whisper, why would they come? I knew why. They weren't here for me, they were here for themselves. When the applause came, it sounded distant. As people stood, they approached slowly, like they expected permission. The first said my name softly. I replied, Congratulations are appreciated from a distance. Her face fell. The second tried to smile. You look different, she said. I am, I answered. The third stepped closer, voice barely steady. We didn't plan to ruin anything. I met her eyes calmly. Intent doesn't erase impact, I said. Sam moved between us instinctively, but I raised a hand. It's fine, I told him. Daniel leaned in and murmured, Your move, I smiled faintly. I'm not playing. They exchanged looks, panic flashing between them, because composure is terrifying when you expect chaos. Guests watched openly now. Phones came out. I felt no urge to defend myself, no urge to explain the past. That chapter was closed. Lena squeezed my hand once, grounding me. The third ex swallowed and said, We just need a minute. I tilted my head. For what? She hesitated, then asked the question she'd been holding since the doors opened. Can we talk privately? I agreed to talk not because they deserved it, but because I wanted the truth without noise, and we stepped into a quiet side room where the walls felt closer than before. Say it, I told them. The first one spoke quickly. We didn't plan it like this, I replied. You never do. The second swallowed hard and said, It started small. I asked, Small enough to ruin my name? Silence answered. The third finally spoke, voice low. We talked about you. I nodded. I know, she looked surprised. How? I said, because things kept breaking the same way. The first ex rubbed her hands together. We shared things, messages, doubts. I asked, with who? She hesitated, people who mattered. I smiled without warmth. Not me. The second ex cut in. You were too trusting. I replied, that's not a flaw. She flinched. We compared notes, she admitted. If one of us left, we warned the next. I felt heat rise in my chest, but I stayed still. Warn them about what? I asked. The third said, that you give too much. I laughed once. So you taught each other how to take. The first whispered, we were scared. I met her eyes. Of what? She answered, being behind you. That landed harder than insults. The second said, when you supported one of us, it made the rest feel small. I nodded slowly. So you leveled the field by cutting me down. She shook her head. We didn't think you'd notice. I replied, I noticed everything. The third spoke again, tears forming. We never expected you to rise. I asked, because I stayed quiet? She nodded. Because you stayed kind. That hurt more than betrayal. You shared my weaknesses, I said. My fears. The first whispered, we framed it as concern. I answered, it was control. The room felt heavy. The second ex said, when one of us left you, it made the rest feel justified. I looked at her. So one betrayal fed the next. She nodded. We told ourselves you were replaceable. I took a breath. And now? The third said, now we see you. I replied calmly, you always did. You just didn't respect it. The first ex broke down. Seeing you here, happy, made us question everything. I asked, why now? She said, because if you could grow without us, then we were never the prize. That was the truth. My anger pressed against my ribs, demanding release, but I held it. You sabotaged my reputation, I said. People treated me differently. The second ex nodded. We hinted, we suggested. I asked, why? She said, because insecurity is loud. I let that sit. The third whispered, we thought we were protecting ourselves. I replied, you were protecting your egos. They didn't argue. I felt grief rise, not for them, but for the man I was when I trusted blindly. I loved honestly, I said. You turned that into a weakness. The first ex said, we never thought you'd stop needing us. I met her gaze. That was your mistake. Silence filled the room. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse further. I listened until their words ran out. Validation settled in my chest like weight, heavy but steady. I finally said, you didn't break me. The second asked softly, then why does this hurt? I answered, because truth always does. I stood calm, clear. You don't need to carry this secret anymore, I said. I will. They looked relieved, then afraid. I opened the door and added, but you don't get to carry me with it. I stood there with the truth heavy in my chest and realized how easy it would be to burn everything down. To walk back into the hall and let every guest hear what they had done. To watch their faces collapse under public shame, and the thought tempted me more than I wanted to admit. One of them whispered, what are you going to do? I looked at her and said, nothing. She blinked. Nothing? I nodded. Nothing loud. The second ex said, you could ruin us. I replied, you already did that yourselves. My anger wanted spectacle, but my clarity wanted distance. I'm not forgiving you, I said evenly. I'm done carrying you. The third ex asked, is that it? I answered, that's everything. They looked confused, like they expected punishment with teeth. I stepped back toward the door. I won't expose this publicly, I told them. The people who matter already know who I am, one of them said. You're taking the high road. I shook my head. No, I'm taking the last one. They followed me out slowly, faces drained, shoulders slumped. When we returned to the edge of the reception, conversations hushed. Sam looked at me. You okay? He asked. I'm clear, I replied. Daniel studied the three of them and said quietly, time to go. One ex tried to speak. Please, she said. I raised a hand, not here. Lena stepped beside me and asked softly, are you sure? I met her eyes. I am. The exes realized then that there would be no scene. No closure they could shape, no apology that reset the damage. One whispered, we never meant to hurt you. I answered, intent doesn't rewrite impact. Another said, you were supposed to need us. I replied calmly, that story ended. The third wiped her face and said, I don't know how to live with this. I looked at her and said, "That's not my responsibility." The words landed harder than shouting ever could. Guests watched as they turned and walked away, not chased, not cursed, just dismissed. Their steps were slow, heavy, filled with something I recognized as regret. Sam leaned in and muttered, "You could have destroyed them." I replied, "That would have kept me tied to them." Daniel nodded once. Restraint hurts longer. I felt no triumph, no rush, just a quiet sense of alignment. Lena squeezed my hand and said, "I'm proud of you." I replied, "I chose us." As the music resumed, I felt the shift settle fully. Power wasn't in revenge. It was in refusal. I didn't need to forgive them to be free. I didn't need to punish them to be strong. I let them leave carrying the weight of what they did, unanswered, unresolved, escorted by my anger. That silence would follow them longer than any accusation. I turned back to the room, to my life, to my future, knowing they would replay this moment again and again, searching for a reaction that never came. That was the consequence. That was the end. After the wedding, life didn't explode, it settled, and that was how I knew I'd chosen right. Sam told me first. "People are talking," he said. "About them," I replied. "They always do." He hesitated. "One of them lost a major contract." I asked, "Why?" He said, "Someone questioned her integrity." I nodded once. Daniel later added, "Reputations don't collapse. They leak." I didn't ask for details. A week later, a mutual friend said quietly, "She doesn't get invited anywhere anymore." I answered, "That happens when trust dries up." Another update came without drama. "The second one's alone," Sam said during a late call. "No friends left." I replied, "That's loud." He paused. "You're cold," I corrected him. "I'm done." The third one spiraled privately. Not publicly, not visibly, just enough to be noticed by those who knew her best. A message reached me through a chain of people. "She keeps asking why you didn't fight." I read it twice, then deleted it. Lena noticed my quiet and asked, "Do you regret not saying more?" I shook my head. "No, I said enough." She smiled. "You look lighter." I felt it too. There was no victory parade, no sense of triumph. Just distance, and distance healed better than revenge ever could. Daniel said one evening, "Silence is expensive." "Most people can't afford it," I replied. "I paid up front." Sam joked, "You became the villain in their story." I smiled faintly. I became irrelevant. That was the real shift. I didn't wake up thinking about them. I didn't replay conversations. When their names surfaced, my chest stayed calm. I realized karma didn't need my help. Life handled the accounting quietly. One night, Sam asked, "Do you forgive them?" I answered honestly, "I don't carry them." He nodded. "That's worse." Lena asked something similar later. "Did it hurt, seeing them fall apart?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "It hurt realizing I once let that matter." The past stopped knocking because I stopped answering. I saw how growth scared people who relied on my availability. I saw how dignity unsettled those who expected reaction. I didn't need to humiliate anyone to feel whole. I needed consistency. Closure came in small moments. Saying no without explanation, walking away without resentment, sleeping without replay. When someone asked, "How did you get over it?" I replied, "I stopped negotiating my worth." That was the truth. I learned that revenge keeps the wound open, silence lets it close. One afternoon, Daniel said, "You're not watching the fallout." I answered, "It's not my weather." He smiled. "Good." I understood then that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it waits, and sometimes it simply removes access. I didn't interfere because I didn't need to. The consequences unfolded naturally, shaped by their own choices, not my anger. I stood where I was, grounded, present, and free of the need to be seen as right. That was the cleanest ending. I looked at my life and felt no urge to look back. Karma didn't need my help. I had already moved on. I stood at the altar again, not to repeat vows but to understand them, and Lena whispered, "Ready?" I said, "I am," and for once it wasn't bravery, it was truth. Daniel leaned in and said, "You did the work," and Sam added, "You didn't become bitter," and I smiled because both were right. I thought about the man I used to be and spoke to him silently. You weren't weak, you were unfinished. Lena squeezed my hand and asked, "Where did you go just now?" I replied, "Home," and she nodded like she understood. When we spoke our vows, I didn't promise to save her or lose myself for love. I said, "I choose you without abandoning me." and she answered, I choose you as you are, and the words felt clean. After the ceremony, Sam laughed and said, No ghosts today, and I replied, They don't live here anymore. Daniel raised a glass and said, To restraint, and I added, To direction. Later, when the room emptied and the noise softened, Lena asked, Do you forgive them? I shook my head gently. I forgive myself, I said. She smiled. That's enough. I realized then that compassion wasn't excusing what happened. It was releasing the version of me who thought endurance was love. I remembered nights I begged for clarity and mornings I apologized for existing, and instead of shame, I felt gratitude for surviving without becoming cruel. I said out loud, You tried your best, and it felt like closure. Lena rested her head on my shoulder and said, You're present, and I replied, I learned how. We talked about the future without rehearsing defenses. When a memory tried to intrude, it passed. When doubt knocked, it left. I didn't rehearse speeches I'd never give or arguments already settled. I chose the next step and took it. Sam called the next day and asked, How does it feel? I answered, Quiet, and he said, That's growth. Daniel texted, Stay deliberate, and I replied, Always. I stopped measuring my life against old losses and started measuring it by peace. I kept boundaries without announcing them. I loved without bargaining. I listened without surrendering myself. When someone asked, Did you get revenge? I said, No. When they asked, Then who won? I said, I did. Not because anyone fell, but because I stood. I didn't win because they lost. I won because I stopped losing myself, chose consistency over chaos, and carried my past as knowledge, not weight. I walked forward with Lena, unfinished still, but no longer broken, and finally willing to keep building without disappearing again. I talked to my younger self again and said, You didn't fail, you learned, and the sentence stayed. I stopped apologizing to memory. I stopped defending choices that kept me small. Lena asked, What do you need now? I said, Time and truth. She answered, We have both. I practiced honesty without cruelty and kindness without self-erasure. When fear returned, I named it and set it down. When pride whispered, I ignored it. I chose presence every morning, patience every night. The mirror stopped arguing with me. My voice stopped asking permission. I became consistent where I was once reactive, careful where I was once desperate, steady where I was once afraid. I didn't erase my past. I integrated it. I carried lessons, not scars. If they ever speak my name, it won't move me. If silence follows me, I'll keep walking. This ending isn't loud, but it's mine, and I choose it again. Today I live forward, married, awake, accountable, choosing growth over grievance, love over leverage, and myself without apology every ordinary day. I close this chapter knowing endings don't erase beginnings. They refine them, and I accept that with calm. I step into tomorrow steady, present, and willing to continue, without chasing, proving, or disappearing ever again. For good.